Hello and welcome to this week's edition of The Coaching In. I'm your host, Claire Pedrick.
Wait a minute, I thought this was the Coach's Journey podcast. Welcome to the Coach's Journey podcast, everybody. This is our attempt at a joke, listeners. This is our attempt at a joke. This is an episode of both, the first time ever, I think. We haven't done this crazy thing before, have we, Claire?
We haven't.
No. We have both appeared on each other's podcasts, but we have never done a joint episode on both. And there's a special reason that we're doing that, which is that we're doing some work together for the first time. I mean, outside of podcasts. On the 10th of May, we were just making a joke about the dates because I got the dates wrong when I told the Coach's Journey community about it. I don't know if anybody noticed, despite working in events for many years. So the 10th of May, we are going to be doing work together for the first time, which is something we have kind of hinted and talked about, I think almost since we first met in person on the Malvern Hills a couple of years ago. And it's finally happening, which is very exciting. And that we wanted to create this episode partly to give a bit more context to it, because it doesn't quite fit neatly into either of our work, of course, because it is neither of our work. It's some work that we're doing together. And we thought we would get together on this episode and dive briefly into the kind of two halves of the topic that we'll cover on that day, on the 10th of May, and see where we get to. Is that right, Claire? Is there anything else that we need to say at the start?
Well, I think we need to say that we want to make Worcestershire a destination for coach training for anyone who wants to do in-person stuff. It's really amazing, isn't it, how many amazing coaches live in this area?
It is.
And when we go on the walks, you know, we had a walk last week and someone else turned up. Well, three other people turned up. And you think, wowzers, you know, there's just the most extraordinary number of coaches, many of whom are really quite or very experienced, which is just amazing. And you and I have had walks round the Worcestershire Beacon and dreamt dreams, haven't we? So it's like a mini festival.
Yeah, we've talked about that before. It's interesting. My memory is the way that we first talked about a coaching festival is essentially you started telling me this idea you'd had, and I was a bit freaked out because it was kind of an idea that I'd had. And you know, it's one of those things where I couldn't really remember. Am I sure that you didn't tell me about it before, and I just remembered it and made it my own? But I don't think so. You know, and it is this. I think there is this space for a gathering of coaching in the UK, not run by a governing body. You know, in the kind of topics that we're going to talk about in this episode, and on the day that we're doing, and also on the workshop that you're running with Ruth Davey the day before. So there is actually a mini festival of coaching happening in Worcestershire this year on the 9th, 10th and 11th of May. You can come to Claire's amazing sounding workshop with Ruth on the Friday the 9th. Our workshop, which, you know, as you probably can see from the title of this episode already, you know, the Artful Coach and the Soulful Coaching Business on the Saturday, and then a free walk on the Sunday morning. So it's for some people, it'll be a wonderful little escape. And you know, if people have never been to Malvern, which is where we're going to be hosting the walk and the second day, but also to Cropthorne, there's another beautiful place. And no one will have ever been to Cropthorne because it's a tiny little place near Evesham and near where I live. But it's a beautiful part of the country. It's on the train from London and from Birmingham to Malvern. So it's really accessible, and yet you feel like, especially with the hills, you know, looking over the town, you really feel like you're away. And so in some ways, it's no surprise to me that there are loads of amazing coaches living around there, because it's a lovely place, right?
Yeah. And one of my supervision groups are joking about coming, and I said to them, why don't you get an Airbnb between all of you?
Yeah.
And make it a lovely weekend to meet people in real life. And one of them is threatening. Someone is working out whether they can come from the States.
Fantastic. I love that.
Wouldn't that be amazing?
It is amazing. So we had, at the Coach's Journey community, we run an in-person workshop sometime. And actually, this still is weird to me because not that many people come. It's always like an intimate workshop, a handful of people. But twice of the 3 years, somebody has used it as an excuse to do a trip from the States. So it's like, I love what a pull it can be to be in a room with the people, the kinds of people that you normally only meet online, because that is how it feels mostly, even when you live in a big city. And I've lived in London, you know, even then, for most of my coaching, I lived in London. Even then, it's still very special to be in a room with the kinds of people that we normally only get to meet, or we normally only meet through through these online communities. So that's one of the many exciting things about this workshop.
Yeah, and people can have breakfast at Papa's Cafe.
It's going to be so nice.
And, drinks in the water cure after the event, and it'll all be really amazing. And then I can walk home.
Yeah, you're very lucky. I'll have to drive home. But many people hopefully will, people will be staying in Malvern and enjoying that place or staying nearby. And I mean, I think we're imagining, we don't really know because obviously we'll be delivering, but we're imagining there'll be social time around this workshop too, and certainly on the day after. But so Claire, I said it briefly, but the title of the workshop is The Artful Coach and the Soulful Coaching Business. And we created that title together on in a very nice little place where we had lunch in Malvern. Actually, not a little, big, spacious place in Malvern with a little fountain behind us, or a little spring. I know it wasn't real Malvern spring, but it was very cool. In the next part of this conversation, it'd be lovely to slow down on this idea of the artful coach. And, I know something about this, especially from your second appearance on The Coach's Journey, where you and Lucia talked about the human behind the coach. And from reading that book, of course, which is where I first came across you using that phrase, I think. And I know some of your listeners will know about that, again, from things surrounding that. But for people who are new to it, what is the artful coach and why does it matter?
So if you look at the professional bodies who have an opinion about names of coaching phases, they often talk about master.
Yeah.
And we never become fully anything. We're always becoming the thing. And master just feels a bit power heavy. So as we were writing The Human Behind the Coach, we were trying to think about a name that wasn't allied to any professional body, that talked about the evolution of coaching, of a coach. So from the beginner to the growing coach to the artful coach. But of course, people were humans before they were coaches. They didn't suddenly get born on the day they got their coaching qualification or their certificate or their credential or whatever. So there's also all of the stuff that's inside us that we bring to every conversation, the kind of humanity in us. So for me, pretty much all the work that I do now is about supporting coaches to become more artful. And that's about how can there be more flow in your work? How can there be more ease in your work? How can you be even more effectively facilitating the thinking of another? I did a webinar before the Ukraine war in Russia. I did a number of webinars for them. And one of the students said, it's not coaching when the coach is doing more thinking than the thinker. So artful coaching is about less. It's about flow. It's about abandoning the eloquent question and embracing the art of a flowing conversation where somebody really, really feels seen and heard and felt and gets new insights into their own stuff. So I think what we decided when we were in that cafe was that we'd have a demo and then talk about some of the things that are in artful coaching and a lot of the things that are not. And then there will be opportunities for people to practice through the day and get some feedback. And you and I will be there, fully available all day.
Yeah, lovely. And as you can hear from Claire, I don't know, I always work like this. Maybe it's just how I am. At this stage, we're 3 months out or something, 4 months out, so we're recording this. We don't know exactly what's going to happen on that day because partly it'll be designed. And, these conversations, every one of them that I'm having about this event, every time I write something about it, every time we speak about it, our understanding of it deepens. And so I love hearing what you just said. And, I think I like that word, artful. As soon as I read it, I liked it. It felt true to me, recognizing those moments of what what otherwise we might have been calling masterful coaching, but with a different energy to it. And I love what you said about, we never are something, we're only becoming. Like, how beautiful. Yeah, go on.
I was working with a group last week. I was covering for a colleague, and it was lovely because I don't normally work in those groups, and it was fabulous. And afterwards, one of them wrote a blog about the experience of watching a coaching demonstration, because I said to them, you need to be watching the thinker think. If you want to learn more about becoming a better coach, you need to be watching the thinker thinking and not watching me coaching. And this person wrote a blog, and the title was, "It's about the art and not the artist." Thank you, Kim.
Yeah, really nice. Really nice. And what a great distinction, because it just, flashes through my mind how many times I've done the opposite when watching. And of course, there are, especially early on, like you talked about stages we go through, there are lots of advantages to that, because partly, like you said, one of the crucial things is what as an artful coach, what are we doing and what are we not doing? And you can learn that really fast by watching somebody do it, even if you don't rationally understand why and what they're doing, right? You can watch that stuff and learn it. But yeah, what a great distinction. And, it makes me think was it Kim? When Kim writes that just makes that distinction about the art and not the artist. It is really interesting to think of artists, which of course is one of the things that this framing of masterful coaching, or of this stage of coaching, this much, I don't know, more fit way of describing it. Because for those who don't know, some of my background was working in the arts. I've been interested in creativity throughout my life in lots of ways. And, and when it's not by no means scientific, right? Because who appears on the Coach's Journey podcast has been almost entirely down to me, and is now down to the host team. And we have lots of things in common. But there is some pattern, I think it is, for example, easier to be, there seems to be a pattern of people who have had some kind of practice of art finding their way to coaching, and I think reaching that stage of artfulness. And, maybe that's because everybody's creative, and, far more people have this artistic side than we think. But I think I've really noticed that the things that I learned from acting for many years, and music and other things, like, have played into my ability to be in flow and service with thinkers. Yeah.
I have to tell you this because I nearly texted you in the moment when it happened. I think I found a musician who can do a live thing for us, with us here in Malvern, for another on-site festival event.
Yeah, I love it. And again, it's one of those things. I don't think I've ever said this to you. Have I ever said this to you? I don't think so. That, I once went to a coaching event, actually, and it opened with a song sung by somebody who was there. And I can't remember if it might be through the work of Jennifer Garvey-Berger, who I really like, who we had on the Coach's Journey. It might be somebody else. This idea that if you put music in that way into a room, it changes the way we all relate to ourselves and each other straight away. As long as it's not any music, but to a certain extent, any music. Especially if we were to all, sing together or something like that. And so I've been wondering, I've had my eye on, for example, somebody in the Coach's Journey community, or who used to be, thinking, actually, if she was at one, I wonder what we could do. And so I love hearing you say that, because I do think it shifts us out of, right, thinking too much, which essentially is one of the distinctions you're making, right, between artful coaching and less artful coaching. Is the more we think, in some ways, the less artful, as the coach, the less artful it is. So that's a little simplified, but I think it is part of it. And music often, it's basically impossible, just like it's impossible to be a really artful dancer, or a really, those really great actors. They're not thinking in the crucial moments. That's when it gets magical, I think.
Yeah. So the kind of headline of the Artful Coach is to learn to watch the art emerge. So for me, everything I do, pretty much, once we've worked out what we're doing, emerges from what I see. I'm learning something as I'm speaking, so I'm going, ooh.
Oh, yeah. Have you got it enough to share it?
No, but I will have by the time we do it, because it's sort of coming. But there's something about it. It's that phrase, the art, not the artist. And I've not really, I kind of clocked that I liked that the line was useful, but I don't think I'd done the processing that I'm now beginning to do. But there is something about what you see. So I did a coaching demo yesterday for Henley, which is one of the big coach training places in the UK. And the feedback was that they'd not ever seen anything kind of a bit dancey, because there was a moment when the person was right close to the camera and was telling me how stuck they were with a question. And I just said, so I saw that, and I saw, well, I guess what did I see? I think I saw the facial expression. I think I saw the closeness to the camera. I think I saw the head down. I think I saw them map out some things they were stuck with their hand. So I just said, how about we both take a bit of distance? And that was that a tool or a technique? Maybe it was, but actually it was just an opportunity because I saw that it all felt too close, the invitation was to back off a bit. So it's interesting, because if you're listening for that, you're listening to the technique. But if you're looking at the thinker, then you absolutely know why I did that, because you may also have seen it, which is why that Friday day with Ruth is about deeper noticing, because I think noticing and being artful are connected. And I think that the industry is under capable of noticing.
Yeah, well, and I think it's really beautiful reflections, and I just love because it's happening for me as well. Like I love what is emerging. When you put a flag in the sand, or you book a room in a town in Worcestershire, and it forces the creativity to then start happening, right? And so I love that this is emerging. A couple of things to catch. One is, I feel like I learned this from you, from the books, like, or maybe from our conversations, but certainly in the last. As I've thought about it, I guess what I would say is noticing is one of these bridges to more artful coaching. In a way, the more we do it, the more artful our work becomes, and the more magical it becomes. Like, it feels more magical when you do it, because it's like, where did that noticing come from? What does this have to do with anything? Who knows? But here, let's present it and see what happens. And then sometimes you get those moments which I'm guessing happened with that client, where the distance happens and then something's shifted and they see something differently. Usually that's what happens when that kind of thing goes. And I guess I think since we last spoke on the coach's journey, and I was thinking about Artful Coaching before, is that idea of really dancing, so really meeting the client where they last are, right? Because as soon as you're meeting them somewhere where they were, even if it was incredibly interesting, like if we go back to it being about the artist or the art and less thinking, for me to be not with what the last thing the client said, I have to be thinking about something else since they said that, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Even if it's only 15 seconds ago. So it's interesting. And of course, at least in my work, there's no science to it, right? We're calling it artful coaching, but I love this. I love this sense and this inquiry.
Being in sync.
Yeah.
Because we're often out of sync, and when we're out of sync, it just isn't working. Can I just share something with you that I did yesterday? I don't know if I can do it again, because it was just really funny. So I'm doing this talk, and I was trying to talk about the difference between the past, everything in that person's life up to this moment, the future, and what we actually do in the room. And I just decided to use the screen and said, the past over here, all this stuff. So if you're on the audio, I've just gone off screen almost. But the part that this stuff is not to come into the room. If it comes into the room, we need to stand in the conversation and look at the past together, not go into the past to investigate it. And that was about artfulness, because it's actually about how we use space. It's about how we use time. It's about how we use everything. But let's not give everybody. I've learned some things that we might talk about on the 10th of May just now.
Yeah, absolutely. and I guess just before, let's bridge into Soulful Coaching Business in a sec. Hi, everybody. Just a quick thing before we get back to the show. As part of our commitment to keeping episodes like this free so we can support you and coaches like you, we'd like to ask something of you. Wherever you're listening to this show, please click subscribe or follow for The Coach's Journey. That's a free way of supporting the show and helping us continue to support you and other coaches. Thanks in advance for subscribing or following, and if you want to hear about other ways to support The Coach's Journey, then listen all the way to the end of this episode or visit www.thecoachesjourney.com. But one of the things that just really occurs to me, even from just, because many people come to your work because of the book Simplifying Coaching. And, this is the Artful Coach just feels like the next step from that to me. Yeah. It's like, because it's artfulness in the way we're talking about it is all about simplicity, right? So it's lovely. Should we do a few minutes on the other thing?
So I've got so many exciting things to tell you, Robbie, that have happened this week where you've been in my mind, and I've gone, that started with a conversation with Robbie. But first of all, tell us, what do you mean by the soulful coaching business?
Yeah, well, I think first of all, because of how I am and how I like to kind of remind people about everything being done by humans. Like, I don't want to beat around the bush. This idea came to me when we were sat in that place in Malvern trying to think what we were going to call this workshop, right? So it's not like this is like it's not like I did a 15-year research project into like what the problem is in coaching with businesses and why people don't have the businesses they want, and came up and it turned out it was because there wasn't enough soul in their businesses. That is literally not how this happened. So, and I think it's important to say that, because otherwise we get stuck in this thing, or at least I do all the time, where I'm like, only someone with a PhD or more can have an opinion or an idea. Yeah. And we need to get rid of that, because it's not artful, right? And so so it came from that. But of course, it wouldn't have stayed as the idea. Like, you wouldn't have gone straight away, yes, that's it. And I wouldn't have felt that as soon as I had the thought, if it wasn't the right thing to call it. And so then the task is to think, or the task was for me in some ways to think, well, why is that the right title? Yeah. It was really interesting. People who have, followed my work a lot, or like my odyssey of episodes on the Coaching In, for example, will know, if we go back to that first appearance, that a big part of my work is a real interest in why we sometimes really want to do something and don't do it for a long time. Yeah. And having a sustainable coaching business is one of those things for a lot of coaches. And I get interested. I think I first heard this phrase from Fred Kaufman, but it's possible he got it from a woman called Elena Aguilar. At least she's written a really nice article about it called Mind the Gap. It's a slightly bigger picture look, hers. But Kaufman basically has this idea that coaching always happens in the gap, right? The gap between what somebody wants and them getting it. And in a way, he sometimes uses that as an opening to coaching sessions. It's like, what do you want to have happen? And then some sensitive way of saying, why haven't you done it yet? Right. Which is the answer of which is the gap, right? I don't know enough. I don't feel the right way. I don't know how to do it. All these kinds of things we get coming up. And so when I sat down, or as I've thought about and done what I call creative procrastination, which is not think about for a while and just see what emerges in the back of the mind on a thing like this, I noticed that for me, the soulful coaching business in a lot of ways is all about the gap, or the gaps that many coaches have between themselves and the kind of the life they want, the business they want. And the kind of three that come to mind, all of which have soulfulness or soul as a response or as an answer. Like a whole bunch of people have just a real allergy to business. And therefore they don't want a successful business because they don't like business. And that's a real problem, because you can't really we're going to be resisting that at all stages. And we're going to be hiding away from the parts of business that are necessary. Like, for example, saying it costs this amount of money to work with me, because they feel like to do that compromises who they are and what they believe in. And the idea then that we might be able to create a business that's soulful is crucial, because, and I've seen this to be true. I've heard other people call it different things. People call it conscious business, or I played with the idea of honorable leadership recently in some of my writing. It's like, how do we integrate this idea that some of what we don't like about business is what we don't like about business, and some of it is just what we're projecting onto business. And then instead, actually, like, we can just change the way we do things. And you're a great example of this, Claire, and we talked about this when you first came on the coach's journey, pricing in a way that is really in line with your values. And we won't talk about it now, but if you ever get a chance, ask Claire about that, because it's a great story, or listen back to that coach's journey episode. So one of them is this allergy to business. And what if instead we can make it a soulful business and make it a practice in growing as a human, right? So that's one part of it. I've got two more, but do you want to jump in?
Go on, give us the other two, and then I might illustrate.
Yeah. So one is the gap is just resistance, and in some way this is the same thing. It's all the ways we procrastinate because of essentially underlying fear. So running a business is scary, right? Because we have to put ourselves out there. We have to sell things. If you're going to sell things, you're going to get rejected, right? There's no two ways about that, really. Like, sometimes people will say no when you make them offers. And, all these kinds of, there are many things in it that many of us have fear about. Some of it may be the same stuff we just talked about. And so, but in my work, since I was really lucky, really just before I started my coaching business, somebody gave me the book, The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield. And the quote in that I always think about, that I remember the most, it's the only one I ever put on slides really ever, is he says something like, I'm going to butcher this slightly, but it's pretty much a good rule of thumb: the more important a call or action is to your soul's evolution, the more resistance you will feel towards doing it.
Oh.
So the more resistance we feel, the more important that is to our soul's evolution. Wow. So there's an important distinctions that you have to make there, like when is it resistance and when is it actually just the wrong thing for us to do? So it's not as simple, but it does reframe all this fear. And I've seen that to be true. So, very briefly, I had this real resistance to sharing myself with the world online, from which came my 12-minute blog, from which came, and I didn't know this, I just knew that idea from Pressfield, and I thought, this sounds right. So I did the thing. And here we are, 400 blog posts later. We wouldn't be having this conversation if I hadn't written those books, and therefore be appearing on podcasts, and therefore here we are, right? So it's impossible for me to ignore how true that has been in my life and how true I've seen it for others. So the soulful business, is also about doing the things. So it's not all about hiding from the things we don't like. It's about doing the things we find scary sometimes so that our soul can evolve, right? And yeah, go on.
And I think that part of it, for me and you, is that all of our in-person engagements, apart from that lunch, have been walking.
Yeah.
And there's been a lightness, so when we have the walks in Malvern, which we do now every 6 weeks, we're just simply walking. But as you walk, you talk. And there's no sales, there's no anything, but often some really beautiful ideas begin to emerge in that gentle, or breathless if you get near the beacon, in that space, in a way that's got a lot less pressure. And I think the walks were never set up to be about business, and they're not really, but they kind of are.
I mean, they're not kind of even about coaching, but of course they are, because of who's there. But
and people just talk about what makes their soul sing.
Yeah, and that is I think as a kind of separate observation, I think it's easier to notice the soul singing when we're out in nature, for example, or when we're in a cathedral, or when we are in a stadium and some musician that we love is playing a song that all 30,000 people love. And those times you can really notice it. But being out in nature, moving, being embodied, it's easier to hear those things. And so then the last kind of distinction to make when we think about soul. So, this is another reason. So this is a distinction that since I launched the coaching business Flywheel, I talk about this distinction quite a lot. one of the reasons I think that people resist, the gaps that people have, is that the things, even if they know the things they need to do to have a more successful business, doing them feels so, because it's doing them for their business, again, feels out of alignment. It feels out of kilter with the soul or with who they really are. And so there's the distinction that I make, which is between soul work and goal work. And obviously the nice thing about that distinction is it rhymes. But the other nice thing is it gives you this sense, which is where it came from. I was like, how do I make this distinction? But so the reason it's got those words in some ways is that, but in some ways is that they're the right words, right? If we try and grow a business without any sense of that we're trying to grow a business, in a way, we're likely to be in financial struggle, perhaps be short of clients, and it's very difficult. We have to have at least some sense of the goal, right? We've got to do the actions that lead to more of this meaningful work, which is good for us and good for the world. But if we are doing it only for that, what I've discovered, and in the coaching business flywheel, I really think those are the 5 things we have to do to have a sustainable coaching business. But pretty much any of them, if you're doing them with more than a sprinkling of goal work, they're less likely to work towards the goal that you want. And so what we have to do in that, the distinction I have to make when I'm kind of teaching this, is we have to remember the goal. You do need to connect with more people if you want to have a sustainable coaching business or a more sustainable coaching business. And you could do that in any number of ways, but you've got to do it. But if when you're connecting with people, it's all about having a sustainable coaching business, it doesn't work as well. So instead, what we have to do is we have to know that it's about the goal, and then we have to make it work that helps our soul sing. So we just be in the connection piece, find the way to connect with somebody in a way that you love doing. And that is way more likely in the end to find a connection with that person so that they will seek you out at the time when they need a coach. So that'll be the last piece. So we can then, and then we can feel really lucky. I always want to say this, that the things that we have to do as a coach to have a sustainable business are things that, like most of us would say, that if we could do them more in alignment with who we are and with, if our soul enjoyed doing them and we could do them more and get better at them, they're part of a life well lived, right? You get to create meaningful connection with people with more skill and more of your soul. You get to do more work with clients. You get to make offers to people with real generosity and without attachment. So I think that's the kind of hopeful side of this. If we do the work to understand how to make our business more soulful, it should be better for us, and it should be better for the business. So more enjoyable, more fulfilling, and it should make the business more successful, at least in the long term. I think it's in the conscious capitalism movement, they have this phrase, multiple bottom lines, which is where you are thinking about the money, but you're also thinking about the purpose of the business, for example, would be another one. Like, how are we fulfilling that? And what is our balance sheet for purpose fulfillment this year? And I do sometimes think, at least in my life, this may not be true, it may be a limiting thought or all that kind of thing. I do sometimes think if I was the kind of person that could be only interested in one bottom line, i.e. money, I would have more money. And I would have less moments where I sometimes think, if I had more money, my life would be easier. But in the long term, I'm very glad that I don't have that I don't have the kind of patience. I can't make myself do that. And therefore that I need at least two bottom lines.
Sorry, I'm just remembering. Do you remember the first day we met in that car park at British Camp?
Yes, I do. And you thought I had a BMW. Is that
you were coming with your lovely daughter, weren't you? And this guy came in with a child on his own, and I thought it was you, and he had a brand new BMW, and I thought, oh, well, I don't know that we'll be friends.
Yeah,
and then you came in your car, and I thought, this is going to be good.
Yeah, slightly battered Toyota Auris from about 11 years ago. Yeah, much more me. I don't mind people with BMWs, but I haven't managed to create that. I haven't created that in my life. I say managed to create it. I've never wanted to create it, really. And because I've always been much more interested in, that's the work I do with clients as well. You connect people to what really matters to them. And for me, BMWs have never really mattered.
Do you know, I nearly texted you last night because yesterday the platinum level of my supervision community is now full.
Fantastic.
And that was down to, I can remember you and I walking around Lady Foley's Drive or whatever it's called up in the hills.
I remember where it was.
You said to me, start a group before it's full. Just start a group. And then people won't mind if they're the only person in the group.
Because they'll get some time with just you, which is wonderful. Yeah.
Exactly. And that has meant that the people in my platinum groups are the right people at the right time. And it's amazing. And, there are other layers. There's space in the gold layer. But as I looked at my very messy platinum sheet and realised I can now throw it in the bin because the groups are full, I just remembered that conversation that you and I had. And actually, that's been a soulful process, because the bottom line process would have been fill as soon as you can.
Yeah,
but actually,
nice.
The soulful process was get the right people in the right spaces in the right groups and wait.
Great distinction. And look, in this workshop, there'll be space for that, right? There'll be space for these kinds of ideas to emerge. And again, once we're doing this work together and we're looking together at these ideas, somebody will come up with one when we're practicing that will be amazing for somebody else as well as for them. And it's one of the lovely things about doing this, thinking about how to do this business in a way that doesn't compromise who we are. I think that's one of the things we often find. We think we have to get ahead, to be successful, we have to compromise who we are. And the game should be about not doing that. It needs to be, if we want it to be sustainable.
Because if we see something, we can bounce our own meaning into it, can't we? Because it's not copying. Because my supervision community and the coaches' journey community, you generously shared what you do. They're not at all similar, although they're both hosted on the same platform. But I was able to make meaning from yours and go, oh yeah, and what about this, and what about that, and what about the other? So,
loads of space for that.
Join us if you would like to come on the 10th of May. I'm sure we'll do something online if our experiment works. I'm sure we'll do it online at some point in the future, but this idea of some kind of on-site festival thing is just a bit of a fun dream for us, isn't it?
Yeah, actually, but I'm just catching it, Claire, that it is that, but I also think it's a thing of this moment in time where actually people, those in-person meetings really, really matter.
Yeah.
And so I'm really glad that we're doing it in person. And yeah, of course, there's accessibility, costs to that, because not everybody can travel, and hard of people with young children, all these hard of people who live in the other sides of the world, and all that kind of thing. But it'll be very wonderful to be in a room together. And I don't think I've said this to you, but I found myself writing it when I was telling the Coach's Journey community about it. Actually, I'm never normally this in a partnership. I don't think I've ever been this confident that it's just going to be great at such an early stage with so little on paper. But I really am. I'm really looking forward to it. And I know that it'll be a really wonderful day. And hopefully it'll be a very artful and soulful day too. Absolutely.
And then we'll arrange a meeting place, and I will be there at 10 o'clock in the morning on Sunday. And it will just be a normal coaches walk up the Malverns, and everybody who comes is welcome. And if you can't come to the Friday or Saturday days, you're so welcome on the Sunday. And I guess that some people will end up in the coaches' greenhouse at Alturo Lounge for something, for food or coffee after the walk.
Yeah, and just I guess, Claire, so we'll put links to the event booking page in the show notes and things. For the walk, is the LinkedIn group the best? I always forget.
For the walk, I'll put the walk booking in there as well. We've got just so that we can know who's coming, and so that we can make a last minute decision on the route.
Yeah, or the rain. If there is some, although hopefully I know there won't be.
Yeah, we're very good at our plan B for rain now. Plan B will be brunch in the coach's greenhouse at the Alturo Lounge on Bellevue Terrace in Malvern.
So good. So good.
So all of that will be in the show notes.
Fantastic. Well, it's been super fun to dive in. I'm more excited even now than I was before. Really looking forward to it.
Yeah. So thank you for listening. I think we've put everything that we need to do in the show notes.
Yeah. And of course, get in touch if there's any questions. And we hope to see you there in person. Yeah. And thanks for listening to the Coach's Journey podcast.
And at the Coaching Inn.
Yes.
There you are.
Nice. There we go. All done.
Nice line. So hope to see you soon. Bye-bye.
Hi everybody, Robbie here again, and just a few quick things to share with you before you go on to the rest of your day. Thanks for getting all the way to the end of the episode. I'm imagining that means you think the work we're doing is important and valuable and interesting, and we think so too. And that's why I want to tell you about a way to support the Coach's Journey and get coaching from me and be part of an amazing group of coaches. That is, join the Coach's Journey community. It's my flexible, affordable group coaching program for coaches. Claire and I touched on it in this episode. You pay between £20 and £100 a month and get access to a certain number of group coaching calls each year, plus some one-to-one time with me if you're a full member, and various other benefits too. And of course, you get the chance to be connected to other amazing coaches on their own journeys. And you can join at thecoachesjourney.com/community. You can also become a supporter of the podcast if you want to give financial support to us, but the community isn't right now. More about that in the show notes, wherever you're listening. And if neither of those is right for you right now, please click subscribe or follow wherever you're listening to the podcast. It really makes a difference to us being able to continue to keep this show free. And as Claire would say, do a little happy dance. Thanks so much to everyone who's supported the Coach's Journey over the years, but in particular, thank you to Alex Whitten, Alan Bedding, Alison Malone, David Norris, Jessica Jem, Linda Ransom, and Lucy Braun for your ongoing support. Thank you too for listening. I hope to see you in May with Claire in Malvern, and also to have you back with us on the Coach's Journey podcast sometime soon.